Hi everyone, in today's video I want to show you how to set up a Nikon D5200. This isn't a review, an overview or a comparison. Those videos will be coming on my second channel, Photo News and Reviews. Today we're just going to be walking around showing what everything on the camera does, what the different settings do, how it works, how to set it up, and run through custom functions and custom menus that you may want to customize to make it an enjoyable experience that I would recommend you set up. If this is your first time watching the channel, please take a moment to subscribe and jump over to thatnikonguy.com. There's a huge community of really helpful people just waiting to interact with you at the community forum there. And let's get stuck right into this guy. Now I'll go close up on this one and run through all of its features. Okay, looking front on this guy, you can see there are several buttons, but they're mostly laid out on the top and the side, so we'll look at them in those parts. But this is your autofocused assist lamp. When you're in low light situations, you can enable this. It'll throw a light out onto your subject and help your camera be able to focus. We will show you how to set that up. And then this one here is your lens release. So let's pop a lens on. This will be the first lens this one has ever owned. You turn the front cap to the right, pull it off, get your lens, and then you match up the white dot and the white dot. Push it on, turn, and it locks into place. To undo it, you push that same button, turn it back to the right, and it releases. For now, we'll just leave the cap on because we're not going to be doing any shooting straight off the bat. Let's take a look at the sides of this guy. Okay, first of all, in the side, which has the grip, is your memory card door. You just slide that one back and it's got a spring activation which will hold it open. This one takes a single SD card, takes all the latest formats. So we'll pop one in. You want the triangle cutout facing to the back at the top. Slide it in and then click the door shut. This is the loop for your camera strap that comes with the camera. I personally don't use them. I prefer a black rapid, but if you do want to connect that, you loop that on that side and on the far side. Let's take a look at the other side. Okay, so here we go. This is all of our connectivity options. First of all, we have the AV out on the right here. Microphone input, which is so important if you're doing video work. That's one of the main reasons to get this camera, although the earlier model one also has that now. You've got HDMI out as well as the port for the optional GPS module. Here on the side of that is the hinge to the rear screen, which we'll look at in a moment. Here's the loop to the other side of your camera strap. You'll see on the side here also there are two different buttons. To demonstrate these, we'll just pop a lens back on. If you want to force the flash to come on, you push this top button. And you can hold down the button to get into the flash mode, which we'll show when we get to the rear screen. This next one is a function button, which you can customize. I personally recommend putting something that you use a lot in there, like ISO, and it actually comes shipped with that already set to be ISO sensitivity adjustment button, so that's really handy. Okay, looking on the bottom, you can see I've already put my RT1 Black Rapid adapter and my 3LT foot on there. But basically that's where the door to your battery compartment is. Unlike some of the other cameras where the battery and the card are in the same place, here the battery's on the bottom, and it's the same battery, the EN-EL14, as the D5100 had. Really handy that you don't have to grab a second one if you were upgrading between the two for whatever reason. And there's your tripod foot. As always, you know, it's a good metal screw, you don't have to worry about that. And you can also notice there that this one does have a metal mount for your lenses. Taking a look at the back of this guy, whole lot of buttons and controls that you want to know how to use, and an impressive 3-inch screen. So this one folds out, it is variable angle, it'll turn 180 degrees forward and 90 degrees back. Don't force it. And that's really handy if you're shooting at a funny angle, like up in the air, and you want to tilt it down so you can still see the screen. Really handy. And you can tilt it all the way around and then close it and have the screen facing outwards when you're using it, and reverse it when you want to protect it. Turning the camera on, it's got a fantastic display which shows your shutter speed, aperture, and ISO just there for you to see. And you can see as you adjust the settings, it gives you a graphical interpretation of what it's actually doing. So that can be really handy to get your head around what's happening inside the camera. Top left is the menu button. So that one gets you into the huge menu, which we're going to navigate a little bit later. Next up is your auto exposure, autofocus lock button. So if you want to, take a reading and then lock it down, you can hit that button there. If you want full details and a tutorial on how to make use of that kind of button, check out the rest of the channel, subscribe. That's the sort of tutorials I do here. This one's just the general setup. This is your dial to change the settings. At the moment, I'm in A for aperture priority, so moving this dial moves the aperture. If I move it to shutter priority, moving the dial changes the shutter. Nice and simple. And if we hold down that function button, that automatically selects ISO sensitivity, and then using that button will adjust that. The play button, we don't have any images on the card yet, but that allows you to go in and navigate through your images. Multi-selector has 4 ways, but then also in between points as well, so you can go through and navigate your way through menus and images nice and easily with that. OK is used to select. Then you've got a plus and minus magnifying glass, so when you are reviewing images that you've taken, you can zoom right in close on them, and then again use this wheel to move around the image and look at the fine detail. Finally is your trash bin, where you can hit that, it'll delete the current image that's up on screen or the selection of images that you've made as you've gone through. Just removing this eyepiece, it slides straight up and you can replace that with a different kind of one. But here's your diopter. You really want to set that because everyone's eye is different. It doesn't matter if you have 20/20 vision, still, depending on how close or how far away you like to put your eye to the viewfinder, you want to adjust that. So you just dial it forward or back until it gets nice and sharp. So focus on some text that should be, really crisp, and then just like when you go to the optometrist, dial through all of that and it will get to a setting which suits your eye. Now let's take a look at the top of this guy. Okay, looking top down on the camera, you can see both of the straps together nice and easily. Here's your hot shoe. That's where you can attach an external flash or a bunch of different accessories. You just slide the plastic cover off and you can see it's got a number of different terminals. That's for using the advanced TTL or through the lens flashes. Just above that is the new stereo microphone. The old 5100 only had a mono mic. This one's got dual pickups for stereo sound. Here's the on-off switch. You can see the trigger just inside that one. That's the shutter release button to take a photo. When you hold it down halfway, it will focus. And you can see there that this one has the autofocus assist lamp already turned on, and it's got sounds turned on. So let's push the button and hear it focusing on the ceiling. No problem, that autofocus assist lamp is really handy. On this little lever, this one has the same live view mechanism as the 5100. You slide that back and it will move your camera into live view mode. We'll show that on the back. Then to start video recording, you just hit the red record button there and it will record. You press it again and it will stop recording. This button is your exposure compensation, and that's so important to learn how that one works. I've done a standalone video on that one. You can see at the link there. Pretty much if it's a dark shot, you want to turn it down. If it's a bright shot, you want to turn it up. Otherwise, you're going to get results that don't reflect reality. Here you can set your release mode. So whether you want a single shot, burst mode, or a timer, or if you're using a remote trigger. Info, you can bring up extra information on your shooting and in playback. And the big boy, here's your mode select dial. Whole lot of different options on this one. These sort of cameras are kind of a step between upper level and entry level, so they have the full manual features and all of the stuff that you'd want there, but it also has a lot of scene modes that the high-end cameras don't bother including. So let's go through. First up is manual mode. If you set in that, you need to set everything for yourself. So your shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, you need to set them to get the correct exposure. If you don't know about manual exposure, again, I've done a video on that one. You can see it at the link there and also in the caption below. Aperture priority. That's what a lot of people shoot in most of the time, myself included. It means that you set the aperture, so how big the circle of light coming in the front of your camera is, and the camera will adjust the shutter speed to get what it thinks is the correct exposure for you. On the other hand, shutter speed priority, you set the shutter and it'll adjust the aperture for you. Then you've got program mode, which is like a smart version of auto mode. Auto mode pretty much will just set all of the settings that it thinks are correct to get you the exposure that you need based on the ambient light conditions. If you're getting started, a lot of people start there, and unfortunately a lot of people get stuck there. But if you can start practicing with aperture, shutter speed, and if you want to, manual mode, and you'll find that you can get a range of different looks in your shots that you couldn't otherwise. Check out those links below. Next up, if you want to force the camera not to use flash, put it onto this mode. That's really handy. These pop-up flashes have a mind of their own sometimes, so that way you can prevent it from popping up. Scene mode. This camera has a whole bunch of different scene modes that are accessible through the menu system for creative things. And it has specific scene modes such as portrait, landscape, kids, sport, macro, and special effects. Special effects are in the menu as well. We'll check those out. But each of these settings basically are customized versions of aperture or shutter priority where you're telling it what kind of a scene you're shooting. So macro, it knows that it's something small and that it probably needs a big depth of field to be able to get it sharp, so it's going to try and optimize your aperture to get the shot for you. Sport, it knows it's something fast moving, so it'll try and use a fast shutter speed to capture that for you. Likewise, landscape, it's not going to bother using a flash, and so on and so forth. Now let's actually take a look in the menu system. Okay, so a nice close-up on the screen there. Let's go into the menu, and there are just reams and reams of different options that you have, and they're divided into segments, so that's really handy. First of all is the playback menu. So when you go in there, you can choose if you want it to automatically review your images. That's handy. You know, some people call it chimping and like it's a bad thing, but if you want to take a shot, have it automatically flash it up, then that's a good thing to have on. Rotate tall, if you take a shot in portrait, so you've turned your camera to this direction, the photo will turn as well, so on your screen it'll be a tall skinny image rather than standing on its side. You can change the name of your playback folder, and once you have shots in there, you can do things like transferring shots off or play a slideshow using your AV out. Shooting menu, this is where a lot of the fun is. So again, you've got your storage folder. Okay, next up is image quality, and here basically you can choose if you want to shoot in JPEG or RAW or both. A lot of opinions out there on this one. I've done a video on that one as well that you can check out. But you know, you can choose if you want to do basic, normal, or fine JPEG. And then when you go down to the next one, you can choose your size. So, you know, this is a 24 megapixel camera. Large is 6000 by 4000, giving you 24 megapixel. Or you can choose medium, which is significantly smaller, or small, which is only 6 megapixel. But if you're only shooting for Facebook or something, that's perfectly fine and it'll give you a whole lot more shots. Basically, the number of shots that you're going to get is going to vary drastically depending on if you include RAW, they're much bigger files, and going from like a medium normal to a large fine JPEG also, you get a lot more quality, which is important. It also takes a lot more storage room, so just weigh up what you need. White balance. White balance is something quite difficult to get the fine points of, but basically the cameras are getting pretty good. In a lot of situations, auto mode will work just fine. But if you are shooting in a specific lighting situation like fluorescence, direct sunlight, flash, cloudy shade, they have different colors of light. So you can set them to, you know, meet that, so then you're not getting your whites looking a funny color. You can also set a preset, which basically you go in and then you can either use a photo or measure. Measure is the most handy. And then say here, I've just got a fairly neutral color wall in the background. I can say, okay, say yes, overwrite pre-existing data if there is any there. And then it'll say, take a photo of a white or gray object filling the viewfinder under the lighting situation that you want to replicate. It does that quite quickly, but you just take the shot and then it will measure what the ambient light color is and adjust all of your shots so that they look correct. Next up is picture control. Now this is something that's so often overlooked, but it's really handy as a starting point. Basically, when you're shooting in JPEG, your camera will apply a whole bunch of different settings to your shot. How much saturation, how much sharpness, all different things, how much compression, and it applies that to the image before making it into a JPEG and locking it. So here you can choose, so standard is, as it says, standard. It's not overly contrasty, it's not overly, you know, sharpened, it's just a standard sort of look. If you go down to neutral, that's reduced saturation and reduced sharpness. Vivid is, you know, for really punchy landscapes, and you probably want to avoid it for portraits because it can make skin tones look really orange. Monochrome, likewise, that makes it in a black and white. You can go in and customize. Do you want it more or less sharp? Do you want more or less contrast in the shot? Lean towards bright or lean towards dark? A lot of options there for you. So they can be really handy, but you will want to tweak them. And keep in mind that if you're shooting in RAW, they will display to you on the screen as you've set it here, but the actual file is captured with all the original data. It's not fixed. So often I'll set mine to monochrome just so I can see it in black and white, but the camera's actually capturing color still. That's really handy. Auto distortion control, the camera will actually detect what lens is on and work out what distortion it expects at a certain focal length and try to counteract it. Color space. The two that this one comes with is sRGB and Adobe RGB. There's different opinions out there. I personally set my camera to Adobe RGB, and then if I'm outputting to the web or something, I'll have my software on my computer output in sRGB. It's a punchier one, but Adobe RGB, it's, in my opinion, is a more natural color profile. Active D lighting, that will try and keep in the brights and the darks in your shot without over or underexposing either one. That can be a really handy thing to turn on, and there's different levels that you can turn it on. This one goes up to extra high now. This one does offer you high dynamic range, which is not a feature I use, but if you want to shoot in high dynamic range, you probably know what that's about, and you can enable that one there. Long exposure noise reduction. I generally leave this off, but if you're going to be shooting long exposures and there's some, lights building up that are giving you a funny effect, you can turn that on. And likewise, high ISO noise reduction. I personally turn it to low or off. Whilst, it can get rid of some of the visible effects of high ISO, the noise, it does so by smudging out detail. And I personally would prefer to have a grainy image than a smudged image. ISO sensitivity settings, that's really handy. This one does give you auto control. So you can turn it on and then your camera will actually adjust the sensitivity as it feels it needs to. You can set your maximum ISO so it won't go above, say, 3200 if you think that's the most it should. And fantastically, this now offers you minimum shutter speed. So you can say, I don't want the camera to go below 1/200th of a second. So then it will, start adjusting your ISO once you get to that level. Auto will actually, it will do it detecting it based on what your other settings are, primarily your focal length. And then if you have really good hand holding skills, you can tell it's slower. If you are a little bit shaky, then you can put it up to faster. That's a really handy feature to have in this camera. Release mode, that's what the button up on top does as well. Single frame, continuous low, continuous high, self timer, delayed, using the optional remote cable as well. Multiple exposure, basically if you want to have it take more than one shot and overlay them within the same frame, and you can choose how many frames you want it to actually overlay, from 2 or 3, that's your options. Okay, jump back out. Interval timer shooting, quite cool. Not all cameras have this one, it's normally a higher end thing. So this one you can set up and say that you want it to start now. You want to take a photo every, let's pop it, 2 seconds, and you want it to take, let's say, 11 shots, and then just say start, and then it will automatically put the timer on and take a shot every 2 seconds for you. You can hear it going there now. Really handy if you want to do an interval shot of, something on the beach or whatever. Let's just interrupt that now. And then movie settings. So at the bottom of your shooting menu, after you've gone through all of these different settings, is movie settings, and that's a sub menu. So there you can choose your frame size and frame rate. 1920 by 1080 is full HD, 60i is interlaced. Actually, the optimum one for normal filming will be this one, 30p. 24p is also fine, and then you've got the 720, which is not the full HD, it's the standard HD, so they call it, and then you've got a smaller version as well. Movie quality, high or normal. Then you've got your microphone. This one does offer you levels. So you've got auto sensitivity, and you can see it's picking up my voice quite well there. Let's tap the mic and you'll see it go into the red. Go into manual sensitivity, and you'll see this one has the settings that the new ones have, like the high-end cameras like the 800 and the D4. Not quite as advanced, but basically you can set it in 20 incremental steps of how sensitive you want the audio to be. So down low, hello, hello, barely registers. But if I put it right up to 20, just my normal speech is already getting picked up quite loudly and actually going over the top. Really, really handy. Quick tip for you if you're using an external mic, turn the camera's gain right down low, somewhere under 10, maybe 6, 7, or 8, and then turn your microphone up. That's going to give you the best result. And then microphone off, you can also disable it. And finally, manual movie settings. If you want to, set your settings in manual, you need to actually enable this. This is an intermediate camera, so they assume that you're going to want a little bit of help there. Next up, custom setting menu, and this one is huge as well. Okay, so going in, you can reset it all if you mess things up and can't find out how to undo it. Autofocus. You'll see all of these are numbered A, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then B. So this is the same things, A, B, C, D, E, F. So if you're ever looking for, oh, where do I turn off this? And then you Google it and it says E3, you can go down to E, go in, and then it probably meant that you will, well, there is no E3, I picked a bad one. E2, auto bracketing flash. Okay, let's go all the way through. So your continuous autofocus selection, you can change the settings in there. Number of autofocus points. This has an autofocus motor from the D7000. It's got 39, but you can tell it to just use 11, the central ones. The autofocus illuminator, that's what I showed you before, that's turned to on. Next up is rangefinder setting. Now you can turn that on or off, and from what I understand, that's if you're using old manual lenses, you can have an electronic rangefinder set on so it will, tell you how far you are from your subject so you can manually focus. EV steps. So this is just when you're moving your exposure and you're changing your exposure by stops. If you don't know what stops are, check the links below. What kind of increment you want it in thirds or half of steps. Half may be easier for you to calculate in your head, but a third gives you finer control. Shutter release button and the AL lock, you can customize exactly what that does. Do you want it to release the shutter or just to be the lock? The auto off timers, how long, basically, do you want it before it turns itself down? A self timer. Remote duration, that's not very handy. Beep, you can basically set, do you want it on low or high? That's it. Viewfinder grid display, so when you're looking through there, is it showing you the grid in there? Quite handy. ISO display, do you want it to show you that? All kinds of sequencing things. These are all fairly straightforward. Flash control, do you want it to be TTL, so through the lens, so they're actually fully talking to each other, or do you want it in manual mode? You need to enable manual if you want to shoot it in manual. Next up is bracketing, and there's a whole bunch of different bracketing. Bracketing is pretty much just taking a series of images with slightly different settings. It's like how HDR is made. That's if you use exposure, or you can do white balance bracketing where you'll tell it to shoot off in all the different ones, so incandescent, flash, da-da-da-da-da. So then hopefully you get the right one. You can set that up in there, how many shots and what mode you want to use. Assign your function button here, F1. You can go in and select a whole bunch of different things here. Quality, ISO, sorry I bumped the trigger there so it went off. And you can set that button to any of these different things, so then you don't have to go through the menu. If you wanted to, for example, you can put it to live view. Okay, so now we're on. If I push that function button on the side, it goes into live view, quite handy. Let's go back in and let's change that. Instead of being that, let's put it on to white balance. Okay, so it's still on live view from before. We'll turn it off. If I push down the function button, there you go. It's popped up to let me set my white balance. Going back in, controls, you can assign exactly what this button is going to do for you. Do you want it to lock, hold, or do one or the other? Reverse dial rotation. By default, when you go in, the exposure compensation and shutter speed dials, they are going to, when you rotate to the right, they're going to move your exposure up. Here you can reverse it if that just is more intuitive for you. You can set whether or not here on F4, if there's no card, you still want you to if you want it to let you take a shot. So let me take the card out here. And you'll see that one was set to no. So when I try to take a shot, it won't take a shot. No SD card inserted. And there are some times that you would want to be able to do that. So if you just want to be able to check that all the lights are working or something, then that's quite handy. but you have to be aware that, you know, it's such a risk if you start shooting thinking you have a card in there but actually don't, you're going to lose all of the shots. So generally I suggest turning that one to lock. Okay, and then reverse indicators. Instead of reversing the dials, you can reverse the indicators. So do you want the higher on the right and the lower on the left, or do you want it the other way as well? Now, jumping all the way back out, now setup. So this is all of your initial stuff that you might want to go through. So monitor brightness, you can clean the image sensor. You can say do it now, and then do you want to do it at startup or shutdown or just one or the other? It comes at both. So when you turn it off, you hear the little ee as it cleans, or we can just do it now. Almost silent these days. Cleaning, cleaning, cleaning. Done. Well done. Now stick with me, the custom functions are still going to be at the end. Lock up mirror, if you want to lock it up so then you can clean your sensor, and you need to be really careful about that, but you hit OK, press the shutter, and it just flicks the shutter up out of the way. I can actually show you that. We take the lens off and the mirror is up. We can see straight into the sensor to actually blow our blower in there, or if you're really brave, clean the sensor yourself. As soon as you turn it off, the shutter drops back down and it's back to normal. Continuing, video mode, you want it in NTSC or PAL, depends what country you're in. All your different output things, your image content, you can change your language, time zone and date you set up when you first turn it on. So I've already set that to, you know, being set to Sydney time. Time and date, there it is. And then which date format you want it in, and the daylight saving is on. You can put image comments on, the rotation again. If you're using the wireless adapter, you can enable it. Firmware, we're currently running that version. That'll just tell you what you're using. Now let's just jump back out of here, and here's some fun things. So retouch menu, once you have images taken on here, you can do quite a bit of editing in camera. I personally don't, but you can go through and, well, you need to have a card in, which I've taken out, but there's filter effects. You can change it to monochrome, you can trim, you can get it to correct red eye, you can overlay two different images, you can process a raw, all in camera, quite handy stuff. And then finally, I've set this bottom one up so it's showing my menu. You definitely want to use this. It's so handy to be able to put a lot of items that you use all the time straight into here. This only has the one customizable function button on the side there. But if you're shooting, and then you don't want to have to navigate through everything, you can just hit menu, go to the bottom, and then have all of your most used items in this list. So to add items, let's say shooting menu. One that I definitely want to have there is my set picture control, which I explained before, if you want to shoot monochrome or that kind of thing. So set position, there's only one, so let's add it in top. Add items, shooting menu again. If you, for example, you could put your white balance or that kind of thing. I'm going to go down and set my ISO sensitivity settings. I'll pop that on top, that's fine. Add more items, and then it depends what you like to, you know, really shoot with. So interval timer, if you're right into doing intervals, you can pop that in there. If you're doing a lot of video work, you can pop video in. So instead of having to go down and go all the way through to the bottom of the settings menu and then get to it, you can be shooting, hit menu, go down to the bottom menu here, and then, okay, movie settings. So I'm gonna go straight in there and it takes you straight to that sub menu. So really, really handy. Okay, so a pretty stylish looking little camera, heaps of customization options and lots of settings, good layout. This is a really good intermediate camera for people. If you've bought this one, get out there, set it up, start using it. As the slogan of the channel is, get your gear out. The best way you're going to learn from here on in is to actually get out there, try, practice, fail, learn, and develop. Sitting online, reading specs, comparing fact sheets, it does nothing for you. Get out there and shoot, enjoy your new piece of equipment, I'm sure you'll love it. Thanks for watching, please subscribe, check out that nikonguy.com, and I'll see you soon.